Hey man, what's happening?
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
And not a phrase we are accustomed to saying, but we're saying it today.
Yeah.
This may be in the history of our podcast, the first Friday podcast we've ever produced.
Yeah, there you go. That's the way to look at it.
Yeah, it's we're always looking for first. This is my first 3-hour ride on a Saturday in May where I've averaged a heart rate of 145 and watts of 230. First time hit it today. No,
I'd
welcome
post
first
that.
off. Yeah, I would too. First off, welcome Crushing Iron Podcast. What are we, episode 258?
Now I'm lost. The whole thing is screwed up. Yeah, it is 258.
Yeah, it's 258.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to give ourselves any extra credit. We usually come to you every Monday and Thursday, and have so for what's getting closer and closer to 3 years. And we appreciate you joining us. But yesterday, we did not come to you.
Nope.
And we had to make some decisions. Late is a relative term. Wednesday evening around 9:30. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know that our family is kind of in between moves. We are moving to Chattanooga. Our house will not be ready until June, but we sold our house in February, and so we're staying with my mom in her upstairs, and so that's where we're at now. And around 9:30, which is late for us, for Allie and I, and Hayden. Hayden just was struggling to go to sleep Wednesday night. He was just super restless, and so we were still awake, which usually we try to get in bed between 8 and 9. And all of a sudden, we just heard this like smack, which kind of sounded like a door, and then just a really big like grasp like of air. And you could tell it was somebody, like a moan, and it was frightening. Both Allie and I sprung up. I jumped out of the bed, sprinted down the hallway, and came around the corner. My mom was laying on the like one of the top landing areas, not the steps. When they make turns, they have that little platform like landing area.
Yep.
And was just laying there. And obviously, like when I made the turn around the corner, my first thought was like, intruder, what had happened? Like it was your adrenaline is just like firing on all cylinders.
Right.
And then finally, like when she had the wind had got knocked up. Anyway, she had come up the stairs to get her dog Bo, who likes to come up and down the stairs sometimes, and I guess made a turn to come back down. They're hardwood stairs, and her foot went out from underneath her, and she smacked one of the stairs. I think just flush.
Oh, jeez.
And so it was a really a focused impact, and ended up taking her to the ER, and which ended up being a very long ER visit. We were there from like 10 to, I think I ended up leaving around 4 a.m. But she's three broken ribs and a punctured lung.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's I think probably everyone that's listened to this podcast has been in a hospital / sat in one of those uncomfortable hospital ER waiting chairs. They are the absolute worst. And I got to say this, and I don't work in a hospital obviously, and I never could, but you would think that they might want to make them a little more comfy. I get it, they don't want them super comfy, because then you got like the frequent flyers that come in that are like the everyday, maybe somebody on drugs who's looking for a fix every day. But you would think that the patient's level would increase if the chairs were more comfortable, because I just feel so sorry for like the intake nurse, and everybody's like, hello, I thought I was going to wait for like 2 seconds, and now I'm waiting for like 7 hours. But anyway, super long night, and enlightening in a lot of ways. But yeah, just a super long night. And finally my mom got to come home. And then we're going to go back today for some x-rays. But anyway, so really not a good night. Definitely thankful that we were here to be able to take care of her and take her in. But just didn't make sense for us to do our regularly scheduled podcast yesterday, even though I had some time that I could have done it yesterday. And I even had a little bit of time I could have, quote unquote, worked. I sent an email out to the team and said, hey, just as a heads up, I won't be commenting on Training Peaks as usual, so don't look for anything, and I won't have your Thursdays are traditionally my busiest day of the week. We do a podcast, and then we and then I spend the rest of the day making sure everyone's schedule is ready and set for the next week. So they can have time to look over it. Then you got people raising. It's traditionally my busiest day. And even though I had a couple hours where I could have, quote unquote, worked yesterday, I wouldn't have been doing good work. And that would have been the same with the podcast. We could have done it, and I could have done some training plans yesterday, but it wouldn't have been anything of any use or quality. It would have been just working to work or podcasting to podcast and stay on schedule. And it really wouldn't have been anything but, hypocritical in a way too, since we always talk about being objective and putting things off and putting your family first. So we did that, and I've got some time today, and my mom is downstairs resting, and if she needs me, she'll text me, and I'll fly down there and get her a banana or something. But anyway, so that's here today.
Right.
It's definitely some things I want to touch on in terms of things that we could talk about on the podcast, but go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, well, first of all, I'm glad she's all right. There was a long time that you guys had to wait to even find out what was going on yesterday, and I wasn't sure exactly what the story was, so it's good to hear that she's home and probably in a lot of pain, obviously, but probably.
Yeah, it's like the two things you can't do anything for. In terms of, like, you can do a chest tube or something, or whatever they call it, for to like get air into the punctured lung, but hers wasn't that severe. They just have to go back for an X-ray today to make sure there's no blood pooling or fluid around the lungs, because it did puncture. And then there's nothing you can do for broken ribs except just sit uncomfortably,
tough it out. Yeah,
it's like the worst, man. It's like there's nothing to do. And there's nothing worse than being uncomfortable.
Broken,
and then knowing you're going to be uncomfortable and having trouble sleeping. Because, like, I went downstairs this morning around 2:30 to grab something for Hayden, and all the lights were on, and she was still awake. Just couldn't get comfortable. Which is like, the worst.
Yeah, I never broke a rib, but I had a severely bruised rib, and it was actually, it happened about 3 weeks from Ironman Louisville one year. I was on a stupid video shoot, and I bent over to plug in a light, and I just crushed my ribs on a table. Mm-hmm. And it took my breath away, and I was trying, I was working, so I'm like, oh, yeah. I didn't want to act like I was whatever, but it is so painful. Exactly. Yeah. Like, it was such a silly, bad, dumb move.
Yeah.
And it hurt so bad, but I just had to try to stay in character and say, all right, let's get this going here. Mm-hmm. But anyway, yeah, I just remember kind of doing all that research, and there's, like, even for stuff like that, there's nothing you can do. It's just a slow healing process.
The slow burn. The slow burn, even for mom.
Yeah, no, and I actually, as we talk about, we had that huge long streak of Monday, Thursdays, and I was kind of glad, it's sort of like, the streak had just, not that it was really mounting pressure or anything like that, but, it's just, like you said, I mean, just to throw things out, and you hadn't slept probably hardly at all,
Yeah, I got like an hour or two yesterday, max.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Putting family first, putting your health first, all that kind of stuff. And that's been a big issue with me lately anyway, because I've been going hard, man, pretty hard. And, we all walk that fine line between feeling pretty good, let's go for it, and pulling it back when it feels good. And I just want to throw out there, if you're feeling really good and you think you want to do more, that's probably the sign to pull it back, because I am... I was nowhere near in your shape. I've been sleeping terribly as usual, but I was really tired yesterday too, and I've been tired today, and it's just been one of those interesting phases of training where you just try to decide if you want to kind of slow it down a little bit or speed it up, and it's just the grayest area fence in the whole training program.
Yep, you got to listen to the body.
Mm-hmm.
And prepare the body. I think and there's a couple of different directions I wanted to go with today's cast, unless you had some huge burning desire of focused rage you wanted to get out of the way. No, I think that's the only place that I've been thinking lately.
is because the other part of that equation is sometimes you might be like, I got to do this, and then you start doing it, and you might feel good by the end of it. But
It's a fine balance.
Then 2 hours later, though, you're like, oh boy, that was not a good idea.
What was it? Are you going to do? I mean, this was even me yesterday. I was like, man, I really wanted to do a short little run yesterday because I had one planned, and I was like, like, what's the point? Like, because I think as athletes and people with structured training plans and type A athletes who never want to miss things, like you sometimes get stuck in that loop of like, well, I have to do it because it's on there, and it just for the sake of doing it, not for the sake of I think it's actually going to make a huge difference, or in hindsight, is this going to give me like a negative effect? And so I'm still kind of playing that game today. Is like, I'd like to run today, but my big picture mindset is I'd like to be fully healthy and feel somewhat rested till I can get some decent runs in Saturday and Sunday. And I'm coming off barely sleeping. I'm coming off very high stress situation. I'm coming off being in a hospital for 7 hours, which most people just pick up something, even though I was like up and down at the sanitizer machine like every 30 minutes. It was like you don't sleep, your immune system's low. You go to a hospital, which there's stuff everywhere. Would running really benefit me, or would it just make me more tired and my immune system lower?
I don't know.
And, yeah, well, I'm almost certainly it would. Because you're already battling stress. Then again, you think, well, would a 30-minute run allow me to relieve some stress?
Right. So that's
the rub. I think you just have to listen to your body and be like, do I really see this making a big difference, or evening things out, and or would it just be more stress, and why am I doing it? So I think it's a hard thing to answer for yourself sometimes. And again, I think we talk about this all the time. Like, one of the everyone thinks about hiring coaches to allow for better performance, and they think about the numbers and the training plan and the written workouts. But so many oftentimes what allows athletes to ultimately reach their best peak performance or their greatest race result, or whatever you want to call it, it's by things that aren't even related to that. It's through having somebody to bounce ideas back off of that's objective, that has your best interests in mind, when you might not always have them in mind because you can't, see the forest through the trees. And so it's always beneficial. Like, should I skip the dish or not skip it? Totally skip it, or do what you feel, or you might feel better actually, going and doing, this. And so again, I think it's always a tough decision to make, and I don't think you'll ever sometimes really know if you're going to make the right or wrong answer unless you just go out and you feel horrible the rest of the day, or you go out and run and you feel great. So I think that I think it's a hard call, but again, that's why having someone you can lean on and talk through and bounce ideas off of is always a good thing. Whether it's a friend or a mentor or a teammate or a coach, it's always good to bounce things off of somebody.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I was thinking to myself, I was wondering if, because there's sort of different kinds of stress, and it's all this sort of affects you the same way. I get that, but if you've got a lot of mental stress that's been building up, maybe that's the time to go for a run versus
Absolutely.
If you haven't slept and your body is stressed out because it's wore down. Those are the kind of differentiations that probably are good to make, sometimes not the easiest to make.
That's such a great point, because mine was both. I was, and that is such a great spin to put on it. Another way to look at it is, if I had been totally rested but super stressed, I probably it would have made more sense for me to go for an easier run, to kind of let some of that loose and think through things and be present and do other things, versus I was super stressed and I was also super tired and super fatigued already and super sleepy. And so, that was probably the reason why I ultimately chose not to run, was because it didn't make sense looking at every system I had to deal with. And then I thought, well, what's going to put me in the best position to be closer to 100% tomorrow? And that's the decision that I ultimately came to.
Okay. So
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so you had a couple things.
Yeah, I think anybody, and again, thank you for if you're listening, thank you for bearing with us through the first 15 minutes as we kind of talk through regular, the Crushing Iron live cast, which is, we do triathlon frequently and almost every cast, but a lot of it's about life, and you and I just have our normal conversations on here. But I think if anyone spent time in a hospital or an ER, it's like you're just so often reminded of the fragility of life. And how no matter what we do, we just never know when we're going to get hurt, where we're going to get injured. And I think it's just sometimes how, in general, we take these things for granted.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that kept striking me as I sat in the waiting room for like 3 hours was how many people came in the door that looked like they were just constantly sick, and that they probably knew all the nurses' names by heart. And just the different kind of people that come in. Obviously, in an ER, you're going to get just a total melting pot of different ages and races and body sizes and everything. And I just couldn't help but think like how I think sometimes when we're in a world of endurance and you're focusing on training and you're trying to be your best athletic self and you're training to improve and you're working out all the time, and then you start to nitpick yourself on these numbers. I think sometimes what's lost in that all is the lack of appreciation we can have for what we're doing for our bodies and what that's doing for our minds. And I kind of wanted to shift going about the body and then the mind, because I had another example I wanted to give, but I just think it's really important for athletes, if you're listening to that, get wrapped up in the numbers and the results and the data. It's like, I think it's super important to never lose sight and never lose focus on what the general health benefits are to putting your body through the things that you put it through. And as long as you're doing it wisely and you're not going out in there crushing yourself every day, I think it's important to not lose sight on the days that you put in and the work that you've put in, the hours and hours and hours you put in. And most people change their lifestyle. They don't just add training into it. They, sometimes will take better care of themselves with their diet, or, they'll up their hydration, or they'll start to pay more, not just their diet with, and like restriction, but I'm talking about just like their overall diet in terms of their food choices and making their body a just more well-balanced, functioning machine, and the effect that will have on the rest of your life. We have some athletes that we work with that have gone through just absolutely mind-blowing body transformations.
Yeah.
That have lost like over 100 pounds. And still, like, these athletes, now that they've you kind of forget who you are, not who you are, but where you've been sometimes, and you look at numbers and stuff, you're like, man, I remember when I could like barely walk up a set of stairs, without getting out of breath. And now here I am, worried about not hitting watts on a Thursday. It's like, I think it's just a really good reminder, I think, and obviously, being an endurance athlete and being a triathlete or a runner or a cyclist or swimmer doesn't make you immune to having accidents or getting sick, obviously. But I guess the point being is just how much better off we are from a health aspect. Again, as long as you're not treating your body like a carnival and running it into the ground, that we are, and how fortunate we are to be able to do these things and to have these opportunities, and that so many times we are able to do things that we end up taking things for granted. And so I just think it was a good reminder of just how thankful, because you're reminded of your own fragility and mortality when you sit in those places and see people, and it's just, I think it's a great reminder. I hate hospitals for that very reason. But I think it's just you feel much more, you feel like a much smaller human being when you leave one. Mm-hmm. When you think about just how not in control you are of things that are happening and where you could end up and the things you could be. But I think it's a good reminder. It's a great reminder for me just to be thankful and appreciative and not take things so seriously, when the greatest impact we're ever going to have is, and I think we've all dealt with this. If you've ever been really, really, really sick or injured, I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to athletes that are like, yeah, the doctor said basically you would be this, but since you swim, bike, run, it's only going to be this. your recovery is going to be shorter, or this isn't going to impact you the same, or if you hadn't done this, this would be worse. And so it's proven and it's there. And so I just think it's a great reminder to be thankful and appreciative of the opportunities that we have, and not take everything as a performance gain, but more as a life improvement and what it's going to do for us when we get older and when we eventually have to stop.
Yeah. It is so much about the balance. As you know, obviously, I think a few weeks ago we talked about the fact that I spent a week in a hospital doing a video, and I had similar thoughts. It's sort of one of those things that you'd never want to do, but once you do it, you kind of go there and you kind of see, and it's sort of a reset for your mind a little bit, because your mom went there for an injury, something that needed to be addressed specifically on the spot. And I think when you go to a hospital, a lot of time people are dealing with chronic, illness and things of that nature. And it's kind of sad, because it's sort of like their loop. And a lot of times I think that they get into a cycle of life where the actual hospital, the doctors, the nurses become sort of their emotional support, and in a lot of big ways that becomes what they're, I don't want to say the main reason they're going there, but one of the main reasons they go there. And I've been listening to a lot of these interviews I shot recently, and they become, the big talk is the doctors, we get to know their families, their friends, we support them, and it's a support thing, it's a community thing in a lot of ways too. But as you were saying about working out, and that's all I keep thinking about, as we get so convoluted on the simple things in life, and how, there's a billion dietary, answers and all that kind of stuff, but we don't think about the basics of breathing oxygen. And that's where our exercise comes in, and hydrating our bodies. And we're all probably halfway or chronically dehydrated because we do so many workouts, and most people are dehydrated anyway. And then, sleep and things like that. So I don't know. I just feel like that there's this balance going on, and we can get, in fact, sort of to what we were discussing in the beginning, because I don't know if you caught this. I read one of Steve Magnus's posts about how he was kind of talking about when to go hard, and how they do it. And, he kind of did the same thing about 80 to 85% of the time we're going slow, and 15 to 20% of the time we're doing, oh my God, I'm puking type level stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that sort of permeates through the whole world of training, and now everybody's on this 80-20 thing, and it makes a lot of sense and everything. But my questions always come in that 15 to 20 category, because, as a 20-year-old college track athlete, you can handle, puking in a barrel after your sprints. And, life is a little bit different then. But if you're 40 or 50 years old, I don't know if you want to be going that hard. And there's this gray area all the time out there with these interval workouts and these let's push it, push. And to me, like, hard for me might be in my current shape 85%. And I think that that's a healthier approach. And sometimes I lose focus of that. And that's kind of my point, is that we go overboard, even though it doesn't seem like it is. You just got to be really careful. And I think that's the long-term.
It's a gigantic temptation. And I think for everyone. And I mean, I can't tell you how many athletes I've dealt with that go. Because, I mean, even I'll tell them, like, for most, it's even in the onboarding guide I'll send out, is like, when I say all out, I don't mean with reckless abandon, with no, relative awareness for your body and its current state of fatigue. Or because a lot of people say, run all out, and they'll run with like the worst form ever and crush themselves, i.e. Track Tuesday. And they run in a circle and they never have the same, cadence or foot strike or form that they will the other 95%. So, I mean, take for Track Tuesday, for example, the reason that, if you're a very experienced runner with perfect form and you've done it for a long time and you're very experienced on it, you're probably not going to see any, hard negative side effects. But for 95% of athletes who aren't going to run that fast ever again. Because to use this for example, like let's say an athlete even runs 30 miles a week, which most athletes probably don't. They're training for a triathlon, and they run those 30 miles a week with pretty much the same cadence, probably the same form. The impact is different on their body because of the way that they're running, and that's at a specific pace and working a specific system. And then you run on the track for maybe 2 to 3 miles max, depending on what you're doing for the day. Your cadence is going to be different. Your foot strike is going to be different. So you're basically asking the 30-mile body that you've created, the 30-mile chassis that you've now created, to cover a specific distance for the long term at a lower pace. That's building a durable set, to now go to the track and start with basically a brand new or much more fragile chassis, and ask it to take on and be able to absorb a much higher velocity and speed. And you expect the chassis not to break. And that's what happens. So many times, I have an athlete right now who finally I feel like I'm getting it through their skull, is stop going. And because some coaches will tell you that's the only way to get faster is to go to, no, it's not. And it's a total lie. And it's more for convenience for a lot of coaches to put their athletes on one track. But it's hard. It's in putting your athlete in that situation too, even if they can maybe handle it. You put them in an environment to where they're unless they're a really, really, really smart and cerebral and objective and prepared and experienced athlete who can put their ego aside, most aren't going to slow down when it's time to slow down. They're going to overdo it. And then the next thing you know, they're scrapped running for 2 weeks. And it's a really hard balance between running at 90%. And this is something athletes struggle with too. And I kind of ventured and discussed this on the live Q&A I did in our closed Crushing Iron Facebook group, was, when you say 5K effort, I don't really know my exact pace. And the reason I don't give or want them to sometimes know an exact pace is because let's say your normal 5K pace is a 6:30. That's your PR, 6:30. But you did that on fresh legs. You did that probably tapered. You did it on a specific course. Let's probably say it's flat. So now let's put you on, and let's say it was in the winter time. Now let's go and tell you that 3 months later, on a rolling course with heavy legs, so you might have compromised form with a little bit warmer temps and wind. And now I'm going to ask you to hold that same pace. It's going to be almost counterproductive because you're going to absolutely be torched. But athletes will try to hold it, because it's there. And if they don't hit it, they feel but man, the difference level in the amount of speed I'm going to gain between going 6:30 and instead of 6:45, I'll probably that's the difference between an Olympic gold medalist and intramural all-star. It's the adaptation is going to be almost similar. in that for that short of a burst, but it's about putting together things consistently. And then again, I think one of the things that athletes so often either underestimate or just might not fully understand and grasp is that even if for bike workout intervals, and is a great example, is that if you, let's say 1 week you did 4x8 intervals and your average overall power for those were 230. And then you keep training and you don't take any days off and the load is increasing. And then 2 weeks later, you do the exact same workout with no days, without having any days off, with still upping the load, with still upping the stress, you do the exact same workout. And let's say you only get 228. There's still huge adaptation that's occurring when your body is asked to do things and demanded basically by you telling it to do it, produce power or running a pace or swimming a certain speed under load and under fatigue. Your body still responds and it still adapts. You don't have to be fresh to get an adaptation. And so I think sometimes that's lost with athletes and seeing a number like that, but thinking, oh wait, big picture, let me zoom out for a second. Man, considering the load that I'm under, that's incredible. In what you're able to do versus under load versus not under load, which we talk about all the time is that phrase of fatigue resistance, which is long course racing. And somehow we went from intervals and smashing to fatigue resistance and long course racing. But hey, that's the ebb and flow of the podcast, and that's why we love our listeners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I bet I know you've heard this a lot of times, because I've heard it coaching the club now for 3 months. I've heard it a few times already, is that, yeah, everything was kind of going well, and then towards the end of training, I started doing speed work, and I've been suffering ever since with some kind of injury or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you've heard that story many times in your day.
Oh, yes.
And here's the thing is, like, I don't want to, like, completely slam the door on doing stuff faster or a little bit harder and stuff like that. I just think it has to be a manageable increment.
But that's so when you say manageable increment,
Mm-hmm.
people don't want to hear that, because it's something that you have to, like, really, really focus on and be absorbed in what small gains day after day, week after week, session after session build up to. And it's like, are you a person that wants to go to the grocery and pick out the ingredients and be very meticulous about tasting the ingredients and making sure the things are right and making sure they're fresh,
Right.
and then going home, and then you got to wash and clean everything, get prepped, and then you want to create your own dinner and make sure it's perfect? It takes time and it takes effort, and it's not as glamorous as going to a restaurant and paying $45 for a steak.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. Most people would rather go to there and pay for a $45 steak, because they don't want to do that extra stuff that goes into it. They want that instant thing, that instant result, that instant feedback. And athletes are very much the same way, in that it's hard for them to see, depending on how they're training. And we've talked before, like, you should see most of your breakthroughs on, like, a Tuesday, or a Thursday or a Friday, whatever day it is, in terms of they just happened. They weren't forcefully created, because anytime an athlete tries to forcefully create a PR or forcefully create a breakthrough, the really only optimal word right there is usually break. Something's broken. Something breaks. Either your spirit or your body breaks down, or you're trashed and you're broken for the next 3 or 4 days. It should be incremental. And again, those are the most exciting things as well, because you're working a plan, and you're those incremental, manageable, appropriate challenges, that we give ourselves. But again, like some people, and we know these people, and I think there's a good correlation between people who also like to self-sabotage versus people who would rather have these huge challenges versus incremental, appropriately challenging sessions. That people have this addiction to just wearing themselves out, mm-hmm. or crushing it, and there's really a huge benefit from that. And then the competition that flows between people and within groups that that you can get lost in as well. That will override, because listen, we've all been victim of, or guilty of, throwing our own objective or our own plans or our own, sometimes even beliefs or thoughts, to the wind for being more part of the group, or having the group influence how slow or how fast we in turn go. You're supposed to go out for a group ride. Coach says it's supposed to be super easy. Coach, I couldn't help myself, so I smashed it today. Okay, well, that's fine. Now we have to redo the next 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So we've all done it, and again, like, that's why, on the bike it's less risky. In the pool, it rarely happens, even though sometimes I have to be like, yeah, sorry, coach, just got a little bit jazzed with the guy next to me, and so I wanted to, show him up a little bit. But again, like, you put him on the track, and you only think from the chin up. You don't think with your body and what it's supposed to do, and you can end up just absolutely wrecking yourself.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. It's hard to make those incremental, manageable, because let's be honest, people don't like to see or struggle with an incremental increase of your weekly run volume was 4 hours, and then next week it's going to be 4.5 hours. That's not nearly as exciting as this week we're going to do 3 to 5 1 mile repeats all out on the track.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be just trying so hard to hit their PRs, and then that's all they're going to care about until next Tuesday. I want you to care about all 7 days of the week and how they complement each other and how they're affected by each other positively and negatively to create this healthy balance of appropriately challenging and manageable to now it's time to take it easy and let it soak it in to now it's time to push it again. It's a push, it's a shove, it's a pullback, and it's if you're not, you just have to be very careful with it.
Yeah. And I think there's got to be appropriate analogy too, because I've heard coaches say, "Yeah, I've had an athlete do this track work, 5 weeks in a row, and they increase their mile pace, 1 minute per mile or whatever." And they don't like say that was a 25-year-old cross country runner or whatever the case is, and they're talking to a 50-year-old like me. It's like, oh, okay, all right, I'll just start going to the track, and if it worked for somebody else, it must work for me. No, it doesn't come close.
Yeah, or what distance are you training for? Mm-hmm. And B, how's your cycling going? Or how's your swimming going? Like I just think it's sometimes we get so lost in, like, you don't get special points for raising your run game while totally neglecting and sucking at the rest. Like, at least if you're trying to be a triathlete. Mm-hmm. And again, like, so tell me, when was the last time, like you said, it could be a 25-year-old, could be a former track person or cross country. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit easier for that person. It's like the same reason you go out like, hey, you know what? You should swim like Michael Phelps.
You're right. Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Yeah,
not going to happen. You should have the same cadence as Lance Armstrong. His was 90. Or you should. It's like, that's not how it works. And there's just like, but you get so wrapped up in somebody else's, like, oh, it definitely applies to me, and you don't ask enough questions and or demand answers to, well, tell me why or show me why, or how else is this going, and how are we getting better incrementally over everything, instead of just in one workout. It's that's why it's a delicate balance, and it's hard to, and that's why triathlon again is such a hard thing to coach for a lot of people and for athletes to kind of navigate, because it's such a puzzle, because it's hard to make huge leaps in one category in one sport without not neglecting, but without bringing some of them back, because it's such a cumulative load, and you create such a cumulative fatigue between so many different sessions that it's just incredibly demanding of your whole body. Mm-hmm. Swimming, whole body; running, whole body with impact; cycling, half your body, but you can really crank up the intensity and crush yourself in intervals, because you're not using your whole body, and it doesn't hurt with like the pounding of running. And there's just so many ways to stress and demand and crush your system that you have to create as best a balance as you can, and thread that needle of what's too little and what's too much. But is the opportunity to do it for 8 weeks much better than the opportunity to do it for 3 or 4 and then take a 2-week break because I'm toast or I'm sick, and it's a hard balance, and it's a hard balance for everyone to find, whether you're a coach or a self-coached athlete or going off a plan or you're 2 years of experience or 10. It's hard to be objective sometimes, and it's hard to find that balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I keep going back to this woman that won Boston maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and they asked her about her running schedule. She said, I don't know, I just run. And she just would go out and run. And to me, it sounded like she was saying that she ran to how she felt, and she did it appropriately and stuff like that, and put the miles in within. And it was like, it sounded so simple, but it was hyper vigilant about the way she felt, and she ran to those mm-hmm. needs, and she was just putting a lot of miles on. But some days she probably felt good and wouldn't kind of let it rip, and the other days she was just kind of cruising. And it was more about just getting out there. And I always just say, like, for the most part, 90% of athletes in triathlon, aren't really probably going for the prize, so it's like, my general rule on that is, if you're out there and you think you're gonna make an error, always err on the side of caution and a kind of a pullback, because they're very rare are those days of, your youth when you can just go all day and like crush yourself, and then you wake up the next day, oh, I'm sore, I can't walk, but then you kind of be able to just do it again. I think those things are implanted in our brains and our memories that we still have a bit of that. We have a taste of it every now and then, but we got to be realistic.
Realistic? Who wants to be realistic?
I know. I know.
I DNF from a 70.3. Let's do 7 Ironman next year.
Exactly.
Who wants to be realistic? That's not fun. Let's just be realistic about it. Let's. You know what? I don't really feel like running, but I'll probably definitely do it this afternoon. No, you're not. Let's be honest. As soon as you say nah, the nah once, the chance of you saying yes later are like slim to none. So let's just be real about that. But yeah, being realistic, being objective, again, are all incredibly hard things to do. Especially as regardless if you're a coached athlete or a self-coached athlete, it's just it's hard. But it's, again, you have to find the best approach that's going to allow you to continue to do things and do it for the long haul and not the short term. It's short long-term success, short-term PR is the way that with a lot of people look at it, and but again, you get to see those when you race.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's fine if that's all you're trying to do, but you have to keep in mind that over the long term, the best way is just to be moderate, and moderation might be the hardest thing in the world to do.
Yeah, and I don't even know that moderation in terms of I think it's incredibly, like you said, it's incredibly difficult to do things in moderation or to make things moderately challenging because sometimes we get so lost in wanting instant feedback, whether it's good or bad. Like I think something that's often confused with I want to PR is I want to see if I'm not getting faster versus am I actually getting faster? Like they want an answer, yes or no. And they want to put it all in one day and one session and one result, which it's ironic that athletes think that way when every single athlete who's ever raced can tell you and name multiple events where they thought they were so much fitter, but they just didn't have it today. Or they went out and raced out of their minds and thought, I'd never thought in a million years I had that in me.
Yeah, that's true.
Yet they want to go back and judge the other 306 days of year and guess on, I didn't have it today, so you know what? I'm not getting faster. None of this is working. But they don't give up after races. They get back to work. And so, again, moderation is hard in basically everything. And I think one of the most difficult things for athletes too is not necessarily looking at yourself athletically, but looking at yourself as a person and your personality and your characteristics. And are you more susceptible to chasing that or putting yourself in a situation where you can't say no or you can't pull back? And are you going to dig yourself that hole? And I think, again, like that's – and so let me give this example. Like as a coach – and my athletes might not even know this or not, but I'll send out an onboarding guide and I'll tell them, what is, this is what zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, these are what they're called, and this is what the effort level I would like to tell you is, and how you're, based on zone 1, maybe super, super easy recovery, like slowest jog possible. Give me a fanny pack. I might go to the mall and mall walk. Zone 2, your moderate kind of all-day pace. We're just kind of this is your conversation. I'm going out for my long run pace. Zone 3 is what I would call tempo effort, like open half marathon effort. And then Zone 4 would be getting up obviously more towards threshold, which would be like 10K to 5K for some people. But a lot of times athletes want different descriptions or like tell me what this is. But I think what as a coach for me, it's much easier for me to respond and get to know an athlete's level of exertion and how they correspond that to a specific zone than to rewire them at the age of 45. And so many times athletes I'm like, listen, like it's better for me that if I tell you zone 2, and I can see through your pace and through your heart rate and through your training peaks give you like an RPE thing at the end, like scale 1 to 10. Your smile pace is like, I can tell if you're one of those people who, because not we all. As a coach, I know athletes that have a very good sense of who they are and what zone 1, zone 2 through 5 is, and where that should be on a scale of 1 to 10 perceived exertion wise. Some athletes are great at that. Some athletes, when you tell them zone 2, their zone 2 moderate is really, really close to what's more than likely, if we're being honest and objective, their zone 3. So as a coach, what's easier? You to totally try and rewire their feel, or just give them less zone 2 work and less zone 1 work, and get them to do the work you want them to do. You just call it something different. Because again, you have to be objective and understand as a coach, like, what's going to be easier for me? Rewiring a person's feel and making them work harder to better, simulate what I want, versus me just reacting and adapting to what they do and who they are and how they are wired. And that's how you have to respond, versus an athlete who might be really, really good at pacing and effort and perceived exertion and managing themselves. You can give them a wider range. You can be more exact, because you know that their responses and they're going to be driven towards pretty close to what you want zone wise, and they can feel it. Because then even some athletes are, I might say, like, nothing below this, so like make them go slower. And then other athletes, you respond to what they do and who they are, versus, I understand that you have been working this way and this is your perceived effort level for this much for your whole life. But now that you're working with me, you need to basically rewire the way that you think and the way that you feel. And yes, you need to come to grips with understanding your body and listening to things based on feel. Absolutely. But let me apply effort-based zones based on your effort-based zones, not based on mine, because I can do that without causing a tremendous amount of work. It's the same thing as, like, I'd rather take a 45-year-old swimmer who's never swam a day in their life than take a 45-year-old swimmer who's had 15 years of bad stroke mechanics. It's much easier to start fresh than it is to break down someone's and try to get them to rethink and start all over again. And so I think when it comes to things like that, I think it's when you have to know yourself and know your personality. And am I always going to be a pusher, or am I always going to not be a pusher? Am I a person who always runs hot, or am I often always a person who doesn't push hard enough because I'm afraid to go all in, or because I don't think I'm that athlete? And so I think something that athletes, again, like might not think through sometimes too is what is coach doing in terms of why he's giving this? Is it because this is my personality, or is it because he, like, I have one athlete right now who is getting a lot more threshold work on the run because this athlete just can't seem to get over the fact that she is not the athlete that she used to be, and will just run to who she was 5 years ago instead of who she is now. And sometimes you just have to continue to put athletes in that situation where we're like, oh crap, this is actually me. I can do this. Because you'll glance down at your watch and you'll see, it's like the same thing for athletes who've lost a tremendous amount of weight. You go look in the mirror and you're probably going to see yourself 20 pounds heavier, or all you see are the stretch marks that you created when you were 80 pounds heavier. You don't see the new great shape person who's super healthy and much thinner. Same thing for athletes who have seen so much progress, and yet they go out and they go for a run, they glance at their watch and say, whoa, 8-minute pace, that's not me. I can't do that. Mm-hmm. Yet you were just doing it with almost effortless ease that you probably could have gone faster for longer. I just kept at it. But again, you have to rewire the brain, or make athletes rewire their own brain in terms of belief. You don't need to rewire their brain system in terms of how they perceive things. You just need to respond differently as a coach. But for the athletes who have had breakthroughs and haven't really accepted them as long-term who they are now, you have to sometimes push athletes in that direction to find that out so they can be that way more consistently. And again, it's one of the more difficult parts of coaching is learning and listening and paying attention and understand and realize, is this athlete holding back? And if they are, why? Is it because, and you just got to ask them, how's this feel? Oh, it was super easy. Okay, it was super. Okay, well, let's make it hard. Not for the sake of making it hard because we have to be hard, but let's start to push that needle, because athletes have this. I know athletes. I work with athletes. I worked with them in the past who just get scared of pushing it to that extra level because they're afraid to bonk. They're afraid to fail. They're afraid to have a really bad result. Like nobody wants to go out for a running race and like a open half marathon and bonk at 10 and have to walk in. Nobody wants that.
Mm-hmm.
But do you need to put yourself like in situations? I have an athlete that I work with who just runs, and she just did a half marathon, and I kept telling her, I was like, we ran that well, but we got to empty the tank sooner. And again, running races are so hard. And when you get up to like half marathon and marathon, and I still think to this day, racing a marathon is the hardest thing to do in sports. In terms of endurance sports, it's just to race it. And it's so demanding, it's so painful, and it's so long. It's just so hard. Okay. And even a half marathon, if you want to compete and do your best, it's a race from the get go. It's not a long run. But in order to find that level and to get more in touch with your efforts and where that is, I said go sign up for a 5K or a 10K race every month for the foreseeable future, and we'll use it for a good workout. But the point is I want you to find I want you to find that line, and then I want you to go over it, because you won't ever be able to find that line until you have gotten so close to it that you've either bonked or you finished where you thought, if there was 400 meters left, I would have crawled. And so you just have to experiment with the mind and how far you can go and how far you can push yourself, because you're never going to know what that line is if you don't test yourself, in an appropriate way, not an inappropriate way.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't do it often. This athlete has a very good durability, so a 5K, 10K is going to do nothing, in terms of getting her hurt. But it's a great opportunity to learn about yourself and learn how your mind works and learn to push harder. Or maybe not learn to push harder, but understand and realize that you can if you want to, and then gauge that way and learn about yourself and your body. And I think it's a great skill that you should use.
In a way, yeah, that's like an incremental breakthrough or gain. And I think so many times you talk about putting a governor on certain things and slowing down when you need to, but like. Also, I think that governor to that example you were just talking about, as far as how do you hit that next level in a race and push through it or whatever, I think that's about getting out of your mind and getting into your body. Because if you can't relax and actually let that flow, and your mind is always going, I can't do this, I shouldn't be doing this, I'm not this isn't me, or whatever, that's a problem. That's, to me, is about centering. And if you talk about flow and movement in athletics and losing your mind, kind of, it's just sort of like, I don't even remember it, I just did it.
Right.
And I think that takes practice. As you know, for years I've dabbled in meditation. I'm not as consistent as I like to be, but I think that kind of stuff is important when you sit down and center yourself. I sort of read a lot about like martial arts and stuff. I'll never do it because I should say never, but everything I read about is like you really kind of can jack up your body, like if you're rolling and on mats and getting thrown and stuff like that. So I'm a little bit leery of that, but they always talk about like calming the mind and centering the body. And I think there's a lot to be said about that kind of thing when you're racing, because sometimes it does feel easier to me when I'm going a little bit faster. Mm-hmm. And what is that? What is that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I feel you on that one.
But trust. I mean, that's what I mean is you got to let that go out of your mind and just like, okay, I don't know if I can do this for 2 more miles. You probably can.
It's that thing we talk about all the time in terms of the Ironman marathon.
Mm-hmm.
I started walking at mile 15. I just can't do this anymore. And then I run some more. And then I run some more. And then lo and behold, when I make that corner down the last mile, fastest split.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I thought you couldn't. Oh, I could. I just had, my brain just went to this different level, or it asked my body, in fact, to do more, and it, in fact, responded. And so, like repeating those conversations with your body, where your mind asks it to do more, and then it responds. Like you begin to trust your body more and learn about it more. And can I ask more of it, or can I not, or when to ask more? And it might respond, and like maybe it can go longer. And it's that internal governor, that internal power meter, internal pace clock is just get to know it well. But in order to get to know it really well, you also have to figure out what makes it malfunction and what could cause it to break. Because if you can do those things, and then you know how to wire it and work it well and make it work to the best of its ability. Because you don't want to have a 120 mile an hour possible car and only take it up to 80. You don't maybe want to take it to 120 every time, but if you want to race at 100, go for it, and it's fine to do it again the next day. Mm-hmm. It's that delicate balance, but it's hard. Just like the rest of our podcast, we're not going to give you a ton of absolute concrete hack answers, and we might not tell you that's even easy, but it's just it's the thought process that makes you critically and objectively think through things, so hopefully set yourself up better for success tomorrow or today or in 2 months from now.
Right. Yeah, because we basically told your ass to slow down, and then at the end we said we need you to speed up. So there's
or
continuum
to test
there.
Yourself. Yeah, I mean, to test yourself, but do it appropriately. And again, it's like it's not take this. It's a perfect example and probably a good way to end it in terms of what you said about the 25-year-old doing the 1 mile repeats. It's like it's don't take one lesson and apply it to 500. Mm-hmm. Take 500 lessons and apply it to one. And that's how you have to think about the conversations that we have, the topics that we cover, and everything with training is that don't take just like a diet. Don't take a diet for one person as the end all cure all for you. It's not going to work that way. And so you gotta be able to take the experiences, take the lessons, and take them all and try to put out the best product you can each and every day, and then be willing to adapt and get better and be patient and move on.
Works for me, man.
Works for me. So thank you. Crushing Iron Lifecast. Episode 258. Again, thanks for the patience. I know most of you lost some sleep over not getting the cast out yesterday, so to all 4 of you who continually listen, we apologize. Well, you can send us an invoice for your Town Hall PM.
Yeah. I guess that's it, man. I'm going to go pick up my car here and some new brakes.
Oh.
That's exciting.
It is exciting. You need them here in Nashville, that's for sure. But yeah, and it's and again, if you're racing this weekend, regardless of the distance, regardless of the discipline, good luck, have fun, enjoy yourself, and hey, stay happy, be healthy, and we'll see you on Monday.
All right, find your sweet spot.
See you, dude.
All right, man. Bye.